Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Before we hear from our speaker, it's our custom to go around the room and introduce ourselves. So we'll do that now. I'm Martin Snow.
I'm Ari Klein.
Randy Davis. Josh Alexander. Richard Morris.
Michael Murphy.
Jose Garcia.
Baruch Golden.
Aaron Little. Kay Matsuda.
Terry.
Ron Albuquerque.
I'm Carl Wolf.
Jay Corbett.
Tom.
William Maggi.
Michael Smith. Paul Albert.
Tim Cosgrove.
Richard Hedden.
Rich Arana. Oscar Sagimilia. Will Murdoch.
Andre.
Marlon Shapiro.
John Alita. David Lewis.
Todd Hope.
Mark McClellan.
Walter Chang.
Michael Schul. George Hubbard.
Mark Riley.
Roy King. Steve Carson.
Joel Graham.
Ray Dyer.
Peter Washburn.
Robert Rodriguez.
Warren Longmire.
Mark Hoffman. David Axel.
Steve Jestrich.
Jim Winter.
Jack Busby.
I'm Tom Bruin.
I'm Jerry Jones.
Anyone here for the first time or returning after a long absence? Raise your hand. Well, welcome everyone. It's a social time after the speaker, and we hope that you'll interact with the longer-term members and feel welcome. So we'll turn our attention to the speaker now. Jorge Ferrer. Dr. Ferrer is a member of the core faculty at the EastWest Psychology Program at the California Institute of Integral Studies here in San Francisco. He's a former member of the planning committee for the Buddhist Peace Fellowship's Buddhist Alliance for Social Engagement. And he's authored several books, one of which you can find on Amazon.com right now, and the other one is coming out later this year. He teaches courses and workshops in transpersonal psychology, embodied, spiritual inquiry, EastWest studies, and spiritual perspectives on sexuality and relationships. This morning, he's going to speak to us on the topic Beyond Monogamy and Polyamory, Extending Sympathetic Joy to Intimate Relationships. All right.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you all for being here this day, 5 de Mayo. It's not only a lot of activities to participate, but also I've heard difficulties to arrive here in terms of public transportation and other things. So thanks for making the effort. And appreciate the introduction, and it's true I'm core faculty at CIS, but especially when talking about this topic that is so close to my heart and to my own trajectory, both as a spiritual being and as a sexual being, and for me those two are very intimately interconnected. I feel I come to you as Jorge, not as a faculty or an expert in this topic, and my intention in this talk would be as to I would like to share with you a bit of my personal trajectory with this topic, and then offer some ideas, and then hopefully have like a dialogue with all of you afterwards, and we'll move from that. I'm from Spain originally. I was born in Barcelona. How many of you have been in Barcelona? Oh my God! That's great. Anyway, I was raised in a pretty liberal household, sexually and in many other ways. And when I reached the age in which I start that thing called dating, I went through some period of shock. And the shock was that for the first time I realized that if I was kind of like dating this girlfriend, and then I could kiss her on the lips, do certain things I couldn't do with other people. That meant culturally and also psychologically for many individuals that I had to exclude of that kind of contact to others. So the exclusivity of that kind of like a special, intimate form of embodied love, that is kissing, was kind of like exclusive to only one person. And for me, that was like quite a shock. As an adolescent, I was like some very deep part of myself just couldn't grok it. It's like, why in the world, if I feel this love and this impulse was love in others, in the deeper and wider ways, why is that something that should be kind of like excluded for someone else? So after this time of shock, there was a time of kind of struggle and confusion. In which, of course, one tries to adapt as much as one can with satisfaction to the structures that you are given, the structures of the culture, the structures what is considered normal. I'm sure many of you struggle with that in your own trajectories. And that was out of pain, a lot of learning, but pain that in many cases when you embrace it is fruitful pain. It wasn't sterile. It was planting the seeds of many, many insights. After that period of struggle and confusion, I would say would be a period of what we like coming out of the closet as poly. And I'm sure that many of you are familiar with a period of coming out in this culture, right? Being gay men, and that was also difficult, especially since by that time I was already kind of involved in certain forms of spiritual practice and Buddhist practice. I'll talk more about in a moment. The circles in which that coming out as poly, as living and wanting and desiring from what it felt a very genuine place, loving more, in both not only in the spiritual subtle ways but in the embodied sensuous ways, it was considered or seen as something very problematic or attached or narcissistic or things like that. After that, the period of like coming out of the closet, I was lucky enough, when you make like certain inner convictions that sunk within yourself, and when you do certain types of inner work, at some point life responds. And so I was lucky enough after a certain time that the right people started coming into my life. And I had a wonderful relationship of many years with a couple, with 2 men and 1 woman. And that was a period of like tremendous fulfillment and insight and entering kind of what it felt like kind of a quite subtle, almost magic level of reality, breaking many taboos, and of course, as you know, taboos are to be transgressed in order to be completed. That's one of the most tantric spiritual teachings, as you may know. And after that, I felt called, after years of success and fulfillment in that relationship that was also open to other people. It wasn't like this exclusive triad. There was a triad that was open to other connections, but that was kind of like foundation for kind of a relationship. After that, I felt called to a time of celibacy for about 3 years, not too long. That it felt like that the energy after wanting to, after going outwards for a long time and experimenting and moving outwards, wanted to do something inward. And that inwardness led to what I experienced during that time as what I call a second puberty, a kind of like a post-genital puberty, that in which the kind of like sexual energy after a period of latency before adolescence, gets awakened and gets normally concentrated, in the genital, pelvic, anal areas, And after this period of second puberty, in my adulthood, it felt that sexual energy kind of reawakened more in the entire body, more different kind of awakening, not so focused on those areas. And then from that place is where I'm at now. I'm kind of doing kind of my baby steps into a new place that I still don't know what it is. I call it, the title was Beyond Monogamy and Polyamory. And where I'm at is exploring what lies beyond. What's beyond those categories? What's beyond those labels? What's beyond those ways of being? Before I try to unpack what it feels that for me is truth about this beyond, I would like to stress that during much of this time of confusion, struggle, and coming out, I was practicing Buddhist. I started Buddhism in Spain when I was like probably 17 years old, in the Zen Korean tradition, Yukwan de Popsanim, moving to other types of Zen practice. By the way, is this center associated to a particular school, or is kind of more Buddhist ecumenical?
Well, Buddhist ecumenical.
Suspected so. Thanks. So, and then I also was engaged Vipassana, and also for some years also with the order of Thich Nhat Hanh, the school, and a few other teachers, kind of like more less encapsulated in any given school, that I found them to be the most interesting. So during that time, I was on the one hand practicing Buddhism quite seriously, going to retreats, becoming also involved in the Buddhist Peace Fellowship, staying with teachers, things like that. And on the other hand, I was doing all this kind of personal, mystic or erotic exploration into the integration of sensual love and spiritual love, the integration of eros and agape. And that, as you can imagine, it was a bit hard. It was a bit difficult because why? Because in general, in Buddhism, there are certain tendencies, especially as we have received in modern times here in the West, but also originally in the original Buddhism, not so much in certain periods and countries like pre-modern Japan and other places, but in general there was like a tendency towards things around sensuality or the exploration of open-ended exploration of sensual desire as being something kind of like be cautious about, something even like maybe not unwholesome, maybe even like fostering certain hindrances or kleshas and things like that. And on the other hand, many of the teachers I was acquainted, and some of my spiritual Buddhist teachers' heroes, like the Dalai Lama and Thich Nhat Hanh, were quite adamant. They were quite adamant that love, sexuality was okay, but it needed to happen in the context of a monogamic structure, marriage, a long-term commitment to one only person. And this is how Thich Nhat Hanh interprets the precept about not harming with sexual behavior. That's how then the Dalai Lama writes about sexual love. And on the one hand, I was feeling, as I was getting acquainted with Buddhist history and sexuality, that many of you probably are familiar, I was becoming acquainted with the tremendous diversity of sexual expression in Buddhist history, especially in China and Japan, but in other places too. So there was something that I was receiving here in the modern West that it felt kind of like somehow a bit cherry picking certain selective interpretations of the Buddhist teachings. On the other hand, many of these teachers that I really respected, like Thich Nhat Hanh and the Dalai Lama, they were monks. Whose experience of sensuality and sexuality, especially, was very, very likely close to zero. Mm-hmm. So for me, that was kind of like, to what extent these individuals, even with their spiritual insight and understanding, are kind of developmentally qualified to advise or assess what is proper or wholesome or unwholesome sensual behavior in other practitioners. If there is anything we have learned in developmental psychology, is that an individual needs to go through certain developmental tasks, have certain experiences in order to gain competence and wisdom in different developmental arenas: emotional, cognitive, spiritual, and I would argue also primary and sexual. Mm-hmm. So also these kind of like teachings coming from monks like Thich Nhat Hanh and the Dalai Lama kind of struck me as somehow inconsistent with the emphasis on direct knowing characteristic of the Buddhist tradition. in which you can only really speak about what you directly experience, and this is one of the core teachings of Buddhism, and one of the things that characterize the non-dogmatic approach of Buddhists to life, in contrast to the traditions that I really resonated with. But most importantly, it was getting in conflict with my own direct experience. My own direct experience in which had been not only emotionally and personally enriched, but also spiritually enriched by intimate encounters with other people in the context of mindfulness, respect, care, but that they didn't have to involve any kind of like long-term commitment or kind of exclusivity to another human person for the long run. So one of the breakthroughs for me, and this is what the basis of that article I wrote in first for Tricycle, but Tricycle didn't want to publish the whole thing, was too polemical, too controversial, so I published the whole thing in Tikkun later. But to their credit, Tricycle, the editors, they published like the short version. And one of the main insights that for me helped me to reconcile my own direct experience and exploration with my Buddhist practice and my Buddhist values was to experience like firsthand that the quality of mudita, of sympathetic joy, that capability to feel joy when other people are happy, can be and could be extended to the context of intimate relationships and also sensual relationships. In my own explorations with this other couple and in other connections I was having, I was over and over again experiencing that, like a sense of like joy, not even jealousy or tolerance, but joy and celebration when one of the persons I love was having a intimate, sensuous connection with another person, and that was something that was constructive and life-enhancing for everybody involved. So that kind of always left me with joy, and really touched me in deep areas, because it felt that it was like it felt I had been practicing the Brahma Viharas, mudita, loving kindness, compassion in certain retreats, but those experiences gave me like a deeper embodied sense of mudita that I had never ever attained in retreats, maybe because of my lack of discipline. But I would argue that there is something about embodied spiritual explorations that can allow us like an embodiment of certain insights or principles in ways that the practice of solo meditation cannot do. So for me, that insight also left to what I experienced with as kind of a deeper sense of freedom in certain areas of my life. And from that deeper sense of freedom, I just came to see, again, like what for me has been one of the guiding orientations in my life, the importance of this integration of sensuous and spiritual love. And this is something that I would say that most traditions, not only Buddhist, but there is like some kind of like dissociative tendencies between the sensual love, sexual love, and spiritual love or friendly love. In the sense that most traditions would say, yes, love everybody, right? But from your heart chakra up, okay? Don't bring that love down to the other chakras, otherwise you are in murky territory. And spiritual unwholesomeness. And I believe that there may have been some evolutionary reasons for that, and contextual reasons for that, and historical reasons for that, in certain periods of time in which, the evolution of certain values of the heart and consciousness that perhaps needed certain kind of repression of those strong forces, that consciousness could be very easily reabsorbed by those energies. But my conviction now is that most individuals, especially here in the West and in other places, have these values strong enough that we can really re-encounter kind of like that primary energies and integrate those primary energies in a way that is wholesome. One insight that for me was important is the insight between the distinction between the integration of those energies and sublimation of the energies. Normally, in most traditions, and even in tantric practice, in Buddhism and Hinduism, the sexual primary energies are normally used as a fuel to catapult consciousness to states of being, or something transhuman, becoming the god and the goddess in Hinduism, and many of states that are quite disembodied in many different ways. So in a way, what is happening is that in sublimation you use the energy of one level, normally the sexual, life, vital, primary level, to either expand the love of the heart or to send consciousness into expanded ways of states of consciousness. But that, for me, is not an integration. And, I teach in the California Institute of Integral Studies, so we're trying to do integrative work. So what for me the insight is that an integration of those energies, and that's something I was gradually experiencing myself, leads to a mutual transformation of those two energies in a way that the two energies are honoring each other, like in a real marriage. I came to see sublimation as a kind of like form of inner patriarchy, in which like kind of hyper-masculinized mind, consciousness, with these kind of like ideals and goals, use the energies of life, for its own purposes. And I came to see that that integration, of consciousness and the vital world is mutually beneficial for both partners, like in a real, egalitarian relationship, right? In which there is like, mutual enrichment. Consciousness can become more erotized, more grounded in the body through that connection, and the vital primary world also can awaken in different ways, reach an evolutionary impulse beyond its closed biological circuits, becoming a source of life, of healing. I'm sure I'm talking about things that are strange to many of you. So from that place also I started coming to see like that kind of like integration led to what I experienced, that was the essence of human love, and also from that place of compassion, that human love that is both sensuous and spiritual. We are not in the world of the gods, we are not in the world of the animals, we're in the world of the humans. And I believe that that's not random, that there's meaning there, and we're here on planet Earth, that is a place that is embodied, and is sensuous, and is spiritual at the same time. So for me, the essence, what I came to see, the essence of human love, is that love that is embodied and is spiritual at the same time. And then the relationships, a relationship I came to see, or I came to understand, could be seen as a structure to learn to give and receive embodied love, and that as any structure is a temporary structure. Needs to be any structure like it's about channeling the energy for certain purposes, and all structures are transitional, either political or psychological or social, and much suffering arises when we get attached to structures that worked for us in the past, but that they are not working for us any longer. So in the context of relationship, that doesn't mean that you need to change partners all the time. It means that you need to make the changes in the structure, either your consistent partner, or perhaps there could be like kind of like other connections that bring new structures that allow further growth. So that's part of a bit my itinerary with this. Another thing that it felt very strongly, especially in my more mystic or erotic explorations, was about like the and I'm sure that's something that is not new for you or many of you. It's about like the importance of like reclaiming the spiritual significance of physical pleasure, sexual pleasure. Why? Because in the same way that pain contracts the body, physical pleasure relaxes the body. And when the body is relaxed, it becomes more permeable to both that energy of life and that energy of consciousness to attain that kind of like inner non-patriarchal marriage within yourself. So that permeability is fostered by physical pleasure, especially when it's, and this is important, when it's kind of like sought and embraced in a non-narcissistic manner. Most of you are Buddhist practitioners, all of you, so you're working towards moving away from self-centeredness. And I think this is important that a lot of like hedonistic pleasure has been associated in the culture and in many other circles with narcissistic pursuits. It's important to discriminate between those two. And it's important to understand and to experience that sensual pleasure, physical pleasure, can and should be experienced in a non-narcissistic way. Like life flowing through you and engaging others and for the service of all. So from all these perspectives, of course, I start kind of like growing somewhat uneasy with what we can call the enforced monogamy, that is kind of like prevalent in our culture still today, even in the Bay Area and in spiritual circles. And I found that that kind of like enforced monogamy was limited in many ways, was kind of ideological in many ways, but also for me, today obviously it's leading to a paradigm that is called serial monogamy, right? The long-term monogamy does not exist anymore. This is like it's a myth of the past. It never existed fully. Those of you who have studied the history of sexuality, I mean, there was affairs and cheating from day one, and much more than we always suspected. But it existed socially as an institution, and today it doesn't exist anymore that much. But serial monogamy for me also had like a potential handicap. That is when one person is moving from one to other relationships. There's a sense that there's a sense that you can lose or miss a sense of depth, the spiritual depth that the monogamic agreement could hold. So I was always exploring two ways to bring those two together, exploring relationships in which I could have like that kind of like continuity and spiritual depth, and at the same time the opening to be myself, in the expression and my love for others in all these ways. For me, the greatest tragedy of enforced monogamy is like it kind of like in subtly and grossly restricts the emergence and the extension of love on Gaia, on planet Earth. Why? Imagine that if every time that you go to nature, to go to a landscape like a beautiful place, Yosemite, Colorado Canyon, imagine that if you would fall in love with the place. Or in mind that you would express that love, or even if you had an erotic experience there with nature, you would be forced to build your house there, right? What would happen after a few of those experiences that you are kind of like forced to build your house in that place that you fall in love and you had the erotic connections with? That you would start kind of like inhibiting that kind of like expression of love, inhibiting your erotic power, inhibiting all that expression. So in a way, it fell from a kind of a Gaia perspective, like also was like a hindrance there. The last thing I'll say to open conversation is that although I want to unpack a little that beyond, what I mean by that beyond monogamy and polyamory, and although kind of I grew uneasy with monogamy and I saw the limitations and also the limitations of serial monogamy, do not feel that I'm kind of like a crusader against monogamy or something like that, because I'm not. I think that we do come into the world with different psycho-spiritual dispositions and also different biographical histories that predispose us to certain forms of relationship in different periods of our lives, and also that in certain moments in our lives it may work certain structures of relationships better than others. So I think that the important is to becoming clear about where are you at, and then choose the relationship style that is growthful and life-enhancing. And for me, that's part of the beyond, moving beyond the categories. Beyond the categories involves like becoming free from primary biological conditionings that we all inherited as humans from the savannah, from all these hundreds of millions of years that with all these strange relationships with each other, and but also become free from any kind of like ideologies, like both cultural but also even spiritual ideologies. Spiritual ideologies about what is the kind of a spiritually correct relationship to have, and that sometimes can lead to different forms of like struggle and conflict within oneself. And then ultimately to trust life, to be open to and trust in life, like a kind of like cosmic trust in life. That if there is like an impulse and feels genuine, and life provides situations, that's something that we need to explore. So one of the way I closed that article in the Tikkun magazine, they didn't allow this in Tricycle, was to thinking aloud like what it would be to envision what we can call more an inner bodhisattva vow, an intrapersonal bodhisattva vow, in which the conscious mind renounces full liberation until the body and the primary world can be free as well. And this is an idea that has been germinated with me for some time, and this has an orientation in my practice. And what that would mean, because like most of us, especially being born in our culture that is so cognicentric, and a lot of education goes into the mind and its cognitive capabilities, our seat of conscious identity, of personhood, is most identified with the conscious mind. So very often it's very common, or it can be quite common, that one can attain different degrees of freedom, awakening, liberation. One belief that is liberated, even spiritual teachers, on that level of what I mentioned, the heart chakra, spirituality, level of the heart, level of the mind, level of consciousness. But that areas, essential areas of the personhood, like the body and the sexual primary world, are completely alienated or not awake, or completely in different developmental stages, adolescent, infantile, embryonic, and so forth. And I believe that explains a little, it's not a whole picture, but it could help us to understand why, sexuality is always one of the hot issues in spiritual communities, with spiritual teachers and the so-called scandals that I'm sure we're quite bored about. Another one, okay, whatever. And don't get me wrong, I think that many of those so-called scandals are misinterpretations, and you need to look at each one by one. Some Buddhist teachers that got into some of those, and I got all sides of the story, and it's complex. You need to one by one. But in certain cases, I believe that it's clear that there is like a real awakening of the heart and the mind, but primary world, sexual, vital world that is far from awakening, far from discriminative, and therefore the teacher does not have the right full chakra discrimination to understand that to get engaged sexually with certain individuals may not be the wisest way to go. So, and this is, I'll finish with this, and this is one of the things that I think that kind of work of integrating the conscious or the mindful dimensions of yourself with the primary world can lead to. When I talk about an awakening of the primary world, one of the things I mean is that the sexual primary world attains a kind of like inner intelligence, so to speak, so that it awakens in the right measure at the service of the situation with the right individuals. Or it goes in that direction, and there is not a perfect science for that. There's mistakes, and we learn from mistakes, and that's how we grow. But that has been a bit my experience, and it's not something that is self-regulated by values or by the conscious mind, but that is self-regulated by their own primary world, the sexual world. So we want to leave it here, and then maybe we can open up for comments, resonances, contributions, questions, whatever you would like to share. Yes?
Well, first of all, I just want to compliment you on the way you articulate the concepts, makes them both clear and understandable, but also very compelling. So, in just this short time.
Thanks.
So, thank you. I saw the Dalai Lama speak, and a woman asked him a question about raising her child, and he right away said, "Well, I'm a monk, I've never had children, so I can't speak to that." Everybody laughed, but I can't see him ever making that same statement about sexuality. So, good point. For us, when we are maybe exploring whether different modes that you talk about resonate with us, you spoke just at the end about how you have to get a sense of whether it's for you or not. How would you recommend a person? What things should someone watch for in that process of deciding or reaching a point where they say, "No, I'm a monogamist," or "I'm open to this" or "I'm open to that." Besides just that gut feeling, because that could go, you could explore different things for years.
Yes.
So what would someone watch for?
There are two things. Okay. One thing is to carry out this exploration during everyday life, and that's what most of us had to do because there were no context to carry this exploration in more safe environments devoted to that exploration. I believe that that's one of the things that needs to happen more, and today there are certain bodies of work and places in which more conscious, mindful explorations of all this can take place. So that's the ideal scenario, in which there is like a group of individuals from all orientations and walks of life, come together, and there's a safe environment to explore outside the context of everyday life with the usual emotional entanglements and social and cultural pressures. I'm one of the facilitators of Holistic Sexuality work. It's a work that is offered in Esalen Institute in certain places in the Bay Area. That's one environment, but I know there are others. I know there's the Body Electric, I know there is One Taste, I know there are other places that are starting to come. But as a possible orientation for navigating those waters in everyday life, I would say that one needs to pay attention to how the body responds. If after certain experiences, the body psyche, is the body feeling more open, more available, more spacious? Do you feel also more available to others? Do you feel that those experiences are kind of like making you more open person and kinder and heartful, or not? And that's only something that only you can tell, only your experience can tell. So it's your own experience that can be your guide.
But what if that's just the residue of guilt? Like, what if that's just what you're feeling down in your gut? Is just the residue of guilt from the way you were raised?
Yes. Well, that's the tricky thing about doing this exploration in everyday life without the appropriate support of a group context and kind of like place in which there's certain understandings and certain visions, and then that you resonate with. And then you're already aware that things that are going to come up, it's maybe like the previous conditioning, in everyday life, things are more messy in general, right? We're entangled in relationships and emotional and partners, and the messages that we can get from our partners or our partner can touch us very deeply, and maybe are messages that maybe are also conditioned, so it's much more messy. But I would say this is also a process of forging your own inner spiritual authority. So that's an orientation. It's reclaim your own inner spiritual authority, attend to your own experience. That's a lot of what Buddhism is about. Allow your experience to be your teacher, independently of what they say. Partners, your teachers, And if you follow that and you are mistaken, life is going to tell you. And you'll get to know it earlier than otherwise, if you follow that with passion. But if you don't follow it, then it's likely that, you never know, You always have the doubt, you always have the struggle inside, the concern, And if when you follow your passion, you break through certain kind of orthodox teachings and orthodox understandings, hey, more power to you. You see, in all traditions, there is innovation and there is purism, orthodoxy, and both are important, But the tradition is alive. If it's alive, there needs to be new developments, like this, this Changa. Right? Yeah.
I was wondering if you could say more about, you mentioned not feeling jealousy in the relationship that you had.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you could talk more about that, as well as linking it to the Buddhist concept of attachment and non-attachment. And can you talk also maybe about a situation where you did encounter jealousy and how you dealt with that?
Oh, 3 questions to one. Okay, me as I start from the end, there is no such a thing about complete freedom from jealousy, I believe, or from. I think that if you really certain situations, specific situations, I can feel some discomfort, but I wouldn't call it jealousy in the conventional sense. I'm free from jealousy now in the context of partners that I love, when I know and I feel the experience is positive for them too, because then I feel immediately that the experience is positive for me in our relationship. So that's something I experience directly. Jealousy and attachment, obviously there is some kind of connections there, and one could raise questions about the whole monogamic vow and like to what extent there is an attachment to a given structure that offers safety, that is not really in touch with the impermanence of life in the universe, that is more fluid and a different way to go, like rather than freezing something into something that needs to be there forever, that till death pull us apart, right? So I think that there is an exploration to carry on there, with jealousy and attachment. At the same time, I think it's very important to not demonize jealousy. Jealousy can be also a wonderful teacher, and from which we can learn a lot. It can tell us areas that we are lacking. It can tell us things that are not working in our relationship as we want it to work. It can tell us things that our partner are doing that we would like to do but we don't dare to. It can tell us many, many things. So I would say like the orientation here would be like befriend jealousy. If jealousy is an issue in your life, do not fight jealousy. As the attitude in the Buddhist path, so befriending your emotions, negative emotions. Befriend jealousy. So it could be an ally. It can bring you a sense of like respect and alertness in the relationships, and at the same time, my sense is that it can dissolve. Like the tendencies, the tendencies towards feeling jealous, they can dissolve, and there are practices too that can be done in that regard. But again, there are practices that I think they should take the place in certain contexts, and out of context could be messy or could be even potentially confusing and harmful. Like practices, I'll just give an orientation. Practicing which in a gradual way you bear witness your partner engaging with someone else in a sensuous way, in a level with boundaries, in a level of implication that can feel comfortable. Practicing which witness does as you become aware and mindful of your own feelings and thoughts and sensations, and then you can explore that, opening that but in a gradual way and in that appropriate context. Yeah.
To be honest, I have to actually say I'm actually gutturally disturbed by a lot of stuff that you've said. How do you, because when you're talking about the Dalai Lama or about the Buddha, the majority of the words that they spoke wasn't actually to limit sexual expression, but was to limit harm in the community. And I see, when you're here, a lot of people are going to come out of this and say, well, if it feels good, do it, regardless of the harm. How do you deal with sexual exploration and yet not just be okay with saying, okay, it's really not an attachment. It's really not, doesn't cause harm. It really doesn't cause disturbance. Because I can see, I understand what you're saying to a degree, but looking at the gay experience and looking at it with such the great harm that I see around the LI community, looking at people who are dying, people who are in horrible relationships, because they practice polyandry or whatever, or they just do whatever they want to do without considering the harm in the community or the harm to themselves or the harm to other people. How do you deal with that?
That's great. A couple of things. One thing to always remember is that the teachings of the Buddha, the original teachings of the Buddha, as well as of the teachings like the Pitakas, they were mostly written for monks. For monks, not for lay practitioners. That's one thing to consider. From lay practitioners, from the very beginning, there was certain tolerance towards certain explorations. But putting this history aside, because we can discuss that forever. What you describe very, very appropriately is what I would call is the shadow. Is the shadow of polyamory. The narcissistic, hedonistic exploration. Okay, I just do what I want because it feels good. Okay, and actually my entire exploration is guided by avoiding that harming in relationships, and by witnessing how much harm takes place in the so-called monogamic vows, in which there's so much mess and people are cheating each other and there's dishonesty and people cannot even share sometimes but feel attracted by others. It's like, so my whole exploration is about kind of at least opening the conversation up and make the point that in the same way that polyamory can be practiced in the ways that you you rightly said, like when it's speaking narcissistically and that's a problem, it can be practiced in a context of ethical integrity, mindfulness, and like working towards kind of like the embodiment of spiritual values in intimate relationships. And from that, my hope is that dialogue and inquiry takes place in communities, and my hope is that also that a wider spectrum of possibilities are available in the mindset of individuals. How to discriminate between those? I think that by their fruits you will see. You see, if I engage in explorations, and then of course there is like areas of discrimination that you gain through the exploration. So sometimes, but when you engage in explorations, you will see, if people are getting harmed or not, or they are spiritually, personally edified or enriched. And if there is a lot of harm that you're creating, I think it's a moment to pause. Pause really deeply and consider that maybe there is, that path either is not for you, or you are not navigating it skillfully, or maybe, But I would caution not to jump from that place to say, oh, this is just bad for my interconnect, because then we fall into the ideologies based on one's personal experience. But I really appreciate your question. It's very important. Yeah.
Find my voice. I just want to respond a little bit to what you said, because I thought that was a really good question, powerful question. I've known that I'm 65, and I noticed as I've gotten older that one of the things that happens to me is that my own sense of pleasure has sort of moderated into something else, and I don't know the right word. So what I'll pull out is happiness. Rather. And I noticed that my happiness is not something that has to do with me alone, and that over time, over long periods of time, and lots of suffering, my suffering, and lots of other people's suffering, I've become aware that if what I'm feeling is something, a pleasure, something like that, and there are people around me with whom I'm relating, and they are feeling unhappy in something, some other state, then I must pay attention to that, because my pleasure cannot stand in the face of that. And I notice that every day I wake up and I know that I'm going to make bigger and better mistakes than I have made the day before. And that immediately I recognize that what I call a mistake is really an opening up to something I've never experienced before. So I don't really have, the information to guide me. And so I'm going to take steps into the unknown. And therefore, things will happen that I might wish not happen. But that the possibility of learning from that is there. And that expansion sort of deals for me a little bit around what causes suffering and pain in the world.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I cannot agree stronger. That's I think that's the path that we're all trying to walk, to become more discriminative, but I would say not only even mentally, but also, from a heart connection and from even primary connection when you do these explorations about what's harmful and what is not. In a way, like the ultimate answer to these questions is not an answer I can offer propositional. It's a transformative answer. The answer is in a transformation that can take place. That you, as you are speaking to, you gain that kind of like greater discrimination. But and also acceptance for our continuous mistakes. Yeah.
We might have time for one more question.
That's okay. It doesn't have to be a question. It could be also like a contribution or a comment or resonance or non-resonance.
I'd just like to make a bid for Hinduism and the Upanishads. Because the more I study Hinduism and Buddhism becomes a mental offshoot of Hinduism. And I read the Upanishads, which talk about the self inside us. I know self is a bad word in Buddhism. But that self is the energy of the sun. You are that. There's a whole energy thing in Hinduism that I think the way Buddhism has appeared in the West, we've kind of forgotten. It's like Buddhism is chemistry and Hinduism is biology. I don't know, I think that's a source to tap.
Yeah, I do use West studies and We study Buddhism and Hinduism. In my program, it's called EastWest Psychology. The program I teach, and I can see where you're coming from, with the history of Hinduism and Buddhism and the tendencies of Buddhism, And at the same time, it's so important to not generalize, because within the Buddhist tradition, there has been so much passion to, and but things that we have received here in the modern West is very selective teaching and selective approaches. But remember, I don't know how many of you are aware with Zen in the pre-modern Japan and monasteries, and what's called nanshoku, male love. Male love was, completely predominant, and that came from China, but was part of the Shanga, and it was considered to be something integral to the Buddhist Shanga. Would maintain that. So there has been so many things around sexuality. Those of you who are interested in this topic, I would highly recommend Bernard Faurer's book. It's called The Red Thread: Buddhist Approaches to Sexuality. It's kind of dense, academic, but really gives a lot of knowledge base on the history of that. In Hinduism you have the Shakti, right? And somehow in the Buddhist development, the emphasis on the Shakti was somewhat lost. So I think that's where you're coming from. Even in the Tantric Buddhism, which there is an engagement of the Shakti energy for sure, but it's not considered in the ways that the Hindu consider Shakti, as partner of Shiva. One of the last thing, one thing I'll say, do I have time? Yeah. Yes. Is that this for me, when I was coming here, it's the first time I talked to a gay Buddhist Shanga. It's not the last, and I was coming here, I was struck with this thought, in this context of the extension of embodied love in the planet, among human beings, a love that is not only spiritual but is also sensuous. I was struck by this sense that the Buddhist Shangas, or the spiritual gay Sanghas, on this planet, are kind of like a vanguard. It's a vanguard for something that I believe with my visionary hat for a moment. I think in the future, hundreds, millennia years from now, will be quite extended, and that is love among human beings. That will be both sensuous and spiritual, and that doesn't mean that people will not have their own preferences, but that the depth and width of that kind of embodied love embrace will be much, much wider among human beings. And I think that the Buddhist movement in the West, and especially the spiritual Buddhist movement in the West, the gay movement is like a vanguard of that movement from a Gaia perspective. Anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Time now for our announcements. Do we have a host today?
Hi, I'm Todd. I'm the host today. There's going to be a social period afterwards, and we'll have apples and lemon bread, and there's tea. If you have tea, please wash out your cup and put it on the rack to dry. I'm going to be circulating a Dana bowl for donations. We suggest a donation of $5 to $8, more if you can, less if you can't. And towards the end of the social hour, people will gather toward the front door with the intention of going out to lunch afterwards. That's everything. Oh, and if you're new or you want your address changed, please sign up on the pink sheet that's out there by the tea machine. And we're also we're trying to compile a GBF directory. So if you would like your name to be listed in the directory, please indicate yes or no on the pink sheet.
Right.
Yeah, there is a new GBF directory today. It's in the box right next to the Donna bowl. Please feel free to take it. And also, I brought a couple of pamphlets from the Zen Center, a publication from the Zen Center called Buddhism and the 12-Step Model of Recovery. If anyone's interested in that, there's some copies of that too.
A friend of a friend passed away, and he had a nice library on lots of books on Buddhism. So I brought some of those today. They're on the coffee table. They're free for the taking. If they would like any of those.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Baruch, and I have taken over coordination of the Prison Outreach Project. And today we have quite a few letters that would be really great if some kind souls would care to stay after and read through those letters. So probably around 12:15, 12:20 we'll be gathering at this table out here in the tradition that Don started many years ago.
My name is Aaron, and I just wanted to remind people that there's a meditation study group that meets on Tuesday nights at my house at Bolton and Baker Street. We practice meditation, kind of loving kindness, from 7:30 to 8:30, so everyone's welcome to join. So if you want more information, you can just approach me. Also, Jim asked me to announce the speaker for next week. He's G-Sing, but I forget. I didn't bring the piece of paper with the blurb. Maybe somebody can mention about what G-Sing is going to speak about. That would be great. If not, if you can go to the website, gabuddhist.org. You can find out more about him there. But I think a lot of people are familiar with G-Sing. They'll be back next week.
Yeah, my name's Tom. I'm actually looking for a roommate or an apartment to rent here in the city. So if anybody knows of something coming up or would like to speak to me, I'll be here afterwards.
With that, we'll form our closing circle. By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, and live believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.